Good day, and welcome to episode 44 of the Aaron Wayne podcast. Yeah. I'm starting to record the intro music while I'm recording the podcast. I feel like I'm going to just ditch doing intros. It doesn't make sense. Maybe it does. I don't know. If I have a guest, it makes sense to do an intro. But if I'm just doing a solo cast, might as well just jump in. Do it, man. Yes. About to go climbing. I'm teaching a yoga class at the Crimpers Climbing Gym in Christiansburg now. And the class is building. People are cool. And it just makes so much sense for climbing and yoga to go together. But I feel like yogis don't climb and climbers don't yogi, and it's just like they need to be doing that more. But yeah, check it out. It's if you're local, which most of you guys aren't, 6 p.m. on Thursdays, and I'm gonna go do some climbing beforehand. That's not what I wanted to talk about today. I've been, my wife said to me, she said to me many times in the past, like, man, why are you listening? Because we'll go on long drives, or she'll see what I'm listening to on YouTube while I'm doing the dishes or whatever. And she's like, why are you listening to all this like political stuff? Does this not agitate you? Because certain people, including some good friends of mine, they get kind of agitated by thinking about, politics and people arguing and these sorts of things. I actually enjoy it because for whatever reason, my disposition is that I want to argue. Oftentimes I find myself finding the opposite position of the person that I'm talking to, just as like an exercise in figuring out what I think. And that's one of the benefits of the podcast. So my wife has said to me many times, like, why are you into this stuff? And I, this week, realized why I'm listening to all of these podcasts and, going to the dialogue on race and going to these, having conversations with the people I've had on the podcast. The thing that I have realized this week is that as a public school teacher, if I'm not informed on these things come to my doorstep. And it's really obvious to me in the last week that had I not been kind of tuned in to the zeitgeist and how things have just gotten so out of whack with people thinking clearly that, they're going hyper directional in their left and right thinking, that if had I not been privy to that, I wouldn't have been able to see like how those trajectories have gone off. Like, I want to talk about some things that have been happening at school, but I definitely want to honor the fact that, first of all, things with students are 100% private, like they're minors, you know what I mean? And then we had a faculty meeting recently that was one of the things that came from the school board. So I'll talk more about the school board because that is public record. But the faculty meeting stuff we had was like, that's, people in my school community thinking their thoughts and having their opinions and sharing their views. But I will say what I said publicly at the faculty meeting, because I'll actually share that in a second. Because the thing that brought this up to my mind, and one of the reasons I wanted to jump in for a quick podcast before I go climbing, is the school board for my school district is a small rural community with a college town rural community combination. And the school board decided that having any sort of flag that could be interpreted as political within the classroom should be stricken. And, I had things in my room that were then interpreted as being political. I'll just share. I had a pride flag in my room. And I'll tell you why I had it there. I had it there not because I'm gay or a part of that community, but I had that there to signify to being a teenager is hard enough, right? But if you are grappling with a non-typical experience of coming into sexual maturity and you don't feel supported, that can be really challenging, right? You hear all these stories about, and when I was in school, it's like, I didn't really know any kids that were openly gay. And I think that might have had a lot to do with the climate at the time. And now I put that flag up as a signifier, like, hey, if this is your experience, like, I don't really don't really, I'm not going to be in a position to say, don't be who you are. I'm actually in the process right now of intentionally trying to diversify my understanding of a lot of these issues that are popping up in the political world, which has turned, that has sort of bled its way into the educational world, these political views. And so I'm intentionally trying to read, learn, and listen from the individuals who would have a problem with me having a pride flag in my room. And I think that's a really useful tool to anybody listening that might be an educator, because I know of a handful of educators that listen to the podcast. What is it why do these people have an issue with it? And I'm trying to hear that and then grapple with where I land on it. Doesn't really matter where I land on it, because the school board made the decision that I can't have a pride flag in my room because it's associated with political affiliation, which I didn't. I find myself in situations oftentimes where people have no idea what it is I think politically, and I kind of like that because it gives me freedom to span and have independent thoughts. But therefore, I didn't have the pride flag up for anything to do with politics, other than the only reason the pride flag was up is to signify to students that if they're gay, like, this is a place where I'm not going to be critical of your gayness. So nonetheless, I took it down. And the faculty meeting, we had a good conversation about that. And I'm not going to share what anybody said because that's a closed door meeting. But I don't know. Maybe that's an open door meeting. It should be. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. Nonetheless, I'll respect the rights of the individuals there. Though citizenry probably has a right to hear what we say in those faculty meetings. So I don't know. Maybe it's an open door meeting. Maybe it's not. But just out of respect for the people sharing their opinions, I won't share it. But I will share what I said, which is at the end of the conversation, we were wrapping it up. And I said, I spoke to the principal in the group and I said, look, I think the people that were formerly having pride flags in their room had no intention of signifying any political affiliation. I think that was what I just described, which is this is to signify to gay kids that I'm not going to be critical of your gayness. And since that wasn't part of our political affiliation, I'm curious if there's a way that we could communicate with the community that seems to have, reached out to the school board, said this is an issue. What does it look like to bring teachers and the community together so that we can communicate with one another? Because there's so much going on in the news right now where, parents are... I just listened to some conservative YouTube media recently, not like super wild, fringy stuff, but, Ben Shapiro, I'll just tell you, it was Ben Shapiro. I was listening to some Ben Shapiro stuff, and he was citing some things that have been happening in my home state of Virginia of people pushing against, at school board meetings, critical race theory, as well as accommodations for the LGBTQ plus community. And again, not going back to the last solo podcast I did, I'm not going to really try to offer too much of my thoughts on that. But what I think is that the communities seem to be using education as the battleground for them to win their political argument, because people feel so disenfranchised by the macro politics of Senate. Something like 90% of senators and House representatives, there's terrible approval ratings. Like, look these stats up, but here's the rough numbers. At least my intuit of the numbers. It's like they have 30-40% approval rating, but the incumbent wins 90% of the time, which means that people are dissatisfied with the way the Congress runs, but they don't do anything about it. And every presidential election in my experience of living, it's basically split. It's like 50-50, 51 to 48% or something like that, regardless of the presidential election. And so I think people are completely disenfranchised with the macro level of federal representation. But where they do have representation in their communities more closely is in school boards. School board members, I'm going to vote on them in a couple of weeks in November. I'm going to vote for school board members. And I think that a lot of that got tuned in when, the kids went home because of the virus. And now people are watching school board meetings more frequently, and then now they're more tuned in to like, wait, what are they actually, what are they advocating for? And I think that a lot of the liberal and conservative media are telling the communities like, hey, this is what needs to be taught, or hey, this should never be taught. And that's where the macro politics of this country is going to start to play out. And I'm already starting to see it with how I've been told to take down a pride flag. I hear the argument. I've been hearing the argument, and I think that they have, the people that wanted me to take it down have, they have an argument, and their argument is, statistically speaking, gay students represent a small minority of students, which is the whole point of putting up the flag, is to signify to, even because they are a small group of students, to signify to them that they are accepted in my classroom. But equally, there's a small number of very conservative people who feel as if by putting that up, they are, it's sort of going against their beliefs. And I hear that argument too. So it's like this quagmire that there really isn't an answer to, because no matter what you do, put it up, take it down, whatever it is, somebody's going to be uncomfortable. And ideally, teachers like me and others would communicate both to the kids who have, conservative beliefs about what sexuality and marriage and, communal, the way you operate in a relationship. Those kids, I don't need to like completely tear them down as people or give them an affront in their face. And then the kids that have, that are in the LGBTQ plus community, like, I'd like to support them in some way. So it's like, it's this real like it's a sticky wicket, man. And I'm not quite sure what to do about it other than try to get the community to talk to one another, because people are seeing these YouTube clips on Facebook, and they're hearing pundits on the corporate news structure, and it's helping them to form their opinions, and then they're taking it to the grassroots level, which is what we advocate for in a thriving democracy, is for people to think globally but act locally. And in the act of acting locally, people are starting to affect the way that teachers are operating. For example, I had an incident, and again, students have their privacy, and so I'm not going to be too specific here, but I had a confrontation between two students that led to a situation where no matter what I did, and I would have easily gotten a call from a parent. So I either say something because I thought something was happening that was wrong, or I don't say something, and the kid who was wronged ends up, feeling like I don't have his back. And so it's like the political has made its way into the classroom, and I don't know what to do about it. Follow up from my previous podcast, Do Educators Have Free Speech? We don't in the classroom, as it should be, which I think I articulated clearly. But through that school board meeting, I learned that they took some passages from the contract in my district, and I don't have free speech in the classroom, and I don't think I should, because I am a government employee, and I cannot show partisan ideology to my students, who are a captive audience. By law, they have to be in my classroom, and if they don't, their parents go to jail because of truancy, or I think they go to jail, but they definitely get in trouble. So yeah, I should not be able to espouse political beliefs in the classroom. I agree. The clarification that I was hoping for is, do I have the free speech to have a podcast and share my political opinions? And I'm pretty sure I do. But I think that remains to be seen. Hasn't been challenged yet in my world, but hopefully it works out. But this conversation, I think that one of the things that I noticed is that this removal of the pride flag, I just want to communicate with the community. I want to talk to the people who had a gripe with it, and like I want to actually hear what it is that their argument is, because the argument that I gave for their side is it's facsimile. It's like it's like an approximation of what I think they think, and so I actually want to create conversation with community members and educators so that we can find ourselves in a space of healing instead of a place of censoring one another, because I don't think that that is necessarily the right choice. Because to me, the pride flag is apolitical. It doesn't feel like a political stance that I'm making, no more than having a poster of Dr. King in my room is political. I have a poster of Dr. King. I have a poster of Mahatma Gandhi. I have a poster of Mark Twain. Said some controversial things. The thing you're probably thinking of is the language that he used in some of his books, but he's said some controversial things. So at what point do those characters come off my wall? Because, and I know somebody who has a poster of Malcolm X, like, is that highly political character? Dr. King, highly political character. Mahatma Gandhi, highly political character. Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, he's one of the most important American writers in history, highly political. So at what point does the community demand that we stop articulating the message of these individuals? And the conversation from the school board is, if it ties into the curriculum, it's good. And if it ties into the curriculum, make sure that you're offering opposing viewpoints. But, the thing about being a public school teacher is that, most of your time is curriculum, but you are also dealing with humans and you're working with people. And as a teacher, you're educating, but you're also trying to create a sense of life skills in young people. And that's one of the things that I find most valuable about being a teacher is, I have these kids that come into my room, they hate to read, they hate to write, they leave my room, and a majority of those kids have transformed to understand that reading and writing is what allows them to live a fulfilled life. Clear articulation and the capacity to understand what's being said by others is what it means to live a fulfilled life where you can take action to change the world for the better or to preserve what has value. And so we have student skills, life skills, these different things that are not part of the curriculum, but, they're things that are taught. And we just have to figure out as a community where that line is. Like, what is it? People that are critical. First of all, I'm a public school teacher, and they talk about how they're teaching critical race theory in the classroom. I have heard nothing about critical race theory. I've heard people say that we should have a broader range of diversity in our literature and historical figures that we study, and that just seems logical to me because the great writers of American history on average have been white men, but that doesn't mean that we disregard intentionally Frederick Douglass or Case Chopin or Ralph Ellison or any of these non-white men characters. So I definitely see the purpose of having an initiative to show windows and mirrors, which is what I teach my kids. So windows and mirrors is an idea that I can give a piece of literature, or a piece of art, a piece of poetry, whatever it is, and a mirror would be a piece of creation that allows me to see myself reflected, the experiences of myself, the struggles that I've experienced. A mirror allows me to see those. Like, as someone who grew up with like a mildly tumultuous childhood, having stretches of poverty and the struggle with that, like, I can see characters, I can see authors, I can see storylines that tell my story so that I can understand my story more deeply. So that's an example of a mirror. And then windows is like, I did not grow up with Langston Hughes' experience of coming of age in Harlem as a young black man in the early 20th century. That wasn't my experience, but I can read Langston Hughes and I can have a window into his world. And by looking through that window to see his experience, I can find the commonality between the human experience. And so, yes, I advocate that we are broadening our scope of windows and mirrors. I want my kids to be able to see themselves in literature, and I want my kids to see others in literature. That's the point of literature. But other than that, is that part of critical race theory? No one's clarified that for me. No one talks about this in the public school system, but this is the thing that we're being told by everyone that we're teaching people. And so what I want to do is I just want to sit down and have a conversation with people who think that we are progressive indoctrination camps, because I don't think that's the case. I think that, yeah, there are some people who got into education because they're activists, but then there are a lot of people, if not the majority of people, who got into public education because they care about the future of young people, and they understand that by helping young people to feel fulfilled and to give them life skills and to teach them how to articulate themselves and to understand what's going on in the world, be it through math, science, history, or literature, we can make the world a better place through educating the youth. And I think that's a majority of teachers. Yes, will there be activist teachers? Yeah, there are some. They're out there. Are they mostly progressive? Yeah, that's what my experience is. But does that mean that the entire school system is being dismantled and turned into, a progressive madrasa? I don't think that's the case. And so I want to be able to communicate with the community. And I think the challenge with that is something I learned from the school board meeting, which is if I'm speaking to the community as a representative of my school, that is not free speech. But if I'm speaking as just a human in the world, there's a distinction there, and I can speak more freely. And so I don't know if the toolkit that needs to be employed is, having whatever parents are willing to come to the auditorium at the school where we're on school grounds. We're all wearing, our badges for the schools we represent, and the parents have name tags to show where their students go to school. I don't know if that's necessarily the right path, because then it could turn easily into a place where the teachers are sort of hamstrung and they can't really offer what it is that they truly think about these things. But then also, I think that in an official manner, we should be communicating with parents, like, you're hearing this in the news. This is what we're doing. You're hearing in the news sources that you follow that we're teaching critical race theory, which has been interpreted by some to be an idea of looking at everything through a racial lens. I think that would be a fair assumption of what people have characterized it as. And honestly, I learned about it in college. I don't really thoroughly understand critical race theory. I think if I were to define it, I would say critical race theory is the understanding that race has played a role in the advantages and disadvantages of individuals throughout American history. Doesn't that seem true, though? And I'm not necessarily saying that we need to be teaching that to children, because there might be negative effects for all the kids. I could see scenarios where it could be negative for a young white kid to feel as if the things that they've achieved have only been because they're white. And I could see a student of color also seeing that the reason that they're not achieving is because people have prejudice towards them, when in reality it might have something to do with are they performing at school? Are they working at school? And so I don't draw that dichotomy to say like, oh, the white kid's doing well and he thinks it's fake because he's white, and the black kid's not doing well, or the student of color isn't doing well because they just don't do well. That's not at all the dichotomy that I'm drawing. What I'm saying is these are possible negative outcomes unintended by incorporating the idea of critical race theory into the curriculum. And so I hear both sides of the argument, and that's the thing. That's why we have to communicate with the community clearly what it is that we're trying to teach children. And I don't know how to do that. So I have conversations in my classroom, Socratic seminars, where, we're reading Lord of the Flies right now, and I'm going to ask them a Socratic seminar question of, using this book in your life experience, are people born with a instinct for peace and cooperation, or for dominance and taking control through force. That's a conversation in literature that's worth having, and Lord of the Flies is one of the best ones for that. So what I'm going to do, throw the question out, and then I'm going to step back and I'm going to watch them discuss, and I'm going to give them some guideposts of how to have a proper discussion by asking clarifying questions, making sure that you're fairly characterizing someone else's argument, avoiding assuming that you understand what someone thinks because they think one thing. And I think that like both teachers and community members would benefit from that style of discourse. So does it look like, renting out a moose lodge and having that conversation? I don't know, but I know that we need to find a way to heal the community so we don't have an adversarial view towards us as teachers. The thing is like we I think I said this in the last podcast. We went through the beginning of the pandemic and the kids went home and the parents were trying to teach them the things that we were sending them home, which admittedly were not high quality educational materials because we didn't have the infrastructure set up for live broadcasting classes. We just didn't have the infrastructure, and it was almost the end of the year and everybody was scrambling. We didn't know if we were going to be out for 2 weeks. The whole world was in flux. So we did our best and the parents did their best. And, I got so many emails from parents saying, I really value what you're doing. This is challenging, trying to get my kid to sit down and read a book. They have all these distractions here. And thank you. Like, I got a lot of thank yous last year. And then we went through a year of hybrid learning, but then we had a year of hybrid learning, and that sentiment started to dwindle, and now we're in a position where everything is so politicized and everybody really thinks they know what they're talking about, and they have no space for uncertainty or curiosity, and the teachers are now the problem. Instead of being seen as public servants who sacrifice immense amount of time and not emotional stability, that's not what I'm saying, emotional, like the bank account of emotional experience that I give to students it's just continually like hearing stories about students that have had negative experiences, seeing how they interface with one another, and seeing like the triumphs of what their social dynamic is, and then the tragedies of their social dynamic. I see all of it in a way that a parent never could, because they're not in that space for that period of time, witnessing the group dynamics of young people. And on top of that, we're trying to educate them. And on top of that, we're trying to help form the next generation of citizens that can take control of the world when we stop taking control of the world. When my generation is no longer there, when my parents' generation is no longer there, we're building the future generation. And all of that's gone out the window because they think that we're trying to indoctrinate them to believe what we believe. And again, are there teachers doing that? Probably. There's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I don't even know. I mean, there's like 60 teachers at my school. My school district has, 7, 8, 10 schools, something like that. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of kids, hundreds and hundreds of teachers. In that pot, are you going to have a handful of activist teachers? Statistically, it's impossible for there not to be. And should we be demonstrating for those teachers that, hey, look, this is not the space for you to push political agenda? Yeah, we should be. I think that that's the right choice. But who gets to decide what's political? Is it political for... I don't even know. It's like we don't have a clear definition of what's political anymore because all of our social dynamics have been politicized. There's a guy, Canadian psychologist. I always forget the distinction between the two. Named Jordan Peterson, who has been wrapped up in a lot of turmoil. So if you Google him, you're going to find some stuff. And I just encourage you to listen to what he's saying instead of what the media says about him. Listen to him, not the stories about him. But he said to quote him, he said our religious worldviews have been sublimated into political views, and that's dangerous because people have lost a sense of, I'm not a religious person, but they've lost that sense of like religious experience, the experience of what it means to have deeper meaning in your life. And again, I'm not a religious person. I'm not pushing a religious doctrine, and it's not my experience. It's not what I look for. It's not what I have. But when we lose a sense of awe and wonder and appreciation, gratitude and grace, the things that are taught in the religious traditions, all of them, to my knowledge, when we lose that, then our political life becomes a substitute for that. And that's not good. That's not good. Because just like you have warring religions throughout history and in the present, if you put so much meaning into your politics that it becomes religiosity, what do you do when someone disagrees with you? If your worldview is so firm that you have no space for curiosity, questioning, or wonder, what do you do? What do you do when someone disagrees with you? Bit of a rant today. I needed to talk this through. I don't think it's a good idea for national politics to be so influential in local school boards. Or do I? I don't know if I do. I don't know what I think. I'm an advocate for people being advocates for their kids, for their community, but I just see so much dishonesty and manipulation in both political parties. You know that the largest political voting group is independents. Something like 44% of voters in America would consider themselves independent. So I would probably consider myself an independent. I don't know, do you? Let me know. Curious to know. But the problem with being an independent is that you don't have a team. And without a team, you're vulnerable to the other side. And it just so happens that both sides are the other side. And I really love teaching. And I don't want for hyper-politicization to get in the way of me teaching. And I also don't want to find myself in a position where I say something that doesn't seem to me to be considered a political thing, such as having a pride flag in my room. I don't want that to be seen as a political act that then puts me in a compromised position. And so I don't know what to do about it. But I took the darn flag down. What message does that give to my kids? For me to take down the flag. Take down the pride flag, that is. And then also a conversation I had with a friend is that, you know, I went to a yoga festival. I got to wrap this. I was supposed to go climbing, and I think I'm not going to be able to do it now. I went to a yoga festival, and I have an American flag because I think that the unifying quality, regardless of anything, is that we, as a country, should have a unifying symbol, which is the American flag. That stands for, again, just to pay tribute to the critics, the American flag has not always been representative of the ideals of America. Or the flag always has represented it, but our policy has not always represented it. Might be a clearer way to say that. So, you know, you had redlining up until the 60s, maybe 70s. You know, I think Alabama, the football team, I just saw a comedian talk about this. I think it was Alabama, didn't desegregate their football team until like 71. Obama was anti-same-sex marriage. So, like, yeah. Has the American mission always been attributed equally and fully? No, that's what the whole March on Washington from Dr. King was. He's like, we're here to cash this check. It was written to us 1776, and we're here to cash that check. Beautiful message, true message need to be said. But hanging the flag now has become synonymous with having some sort of, for a lot of people, not all people, but for some people, they see the American flag as a symbol that should not be representing people. And what that leads to is a further fractionization. I've been teaching all day. My brain's scrambled. Of people into smaller and smaller groups without a unifying quality. And that is bad. So at what point that will be an argument that people will have. And again, I'm not equating the pride flag to the American flag. Not the same thing. Not at all. Doesn't have the same history, doesn't have the same codified documentation behind it. Unless it does, feel free to tell me. I don't know if the pride flag has a constitution or a Bill of Rights, but the American flag does. And they're not the same thing. But if the pride flag has become synonymous with liberal policy and pushing that towards students, then at what point are people on the left going to come back and do the same thing and say that the American flag is representative of conservative politics and conservative ideals? And then where does it stop? And how much of this is a distraction from the billionaires who have continued to destroy the planet and disenfranchise voting capacity through lobbying? There's more lobbyists that work for Facebook than there are senators. Facebook has more lobbyists than we have senators. 300 million people in this country. Facebook has more lobbyists pushing around the government as to the best of their ability than we have senators that represent us. If we keep fighting these battles, these small, not small, they're big. These are big things. Teachers should not be indoctrinating students. Students that are underrepresented by the general population should have a voice. There are things in progressive policy that needs to happen. There are things in conservative policy that need to hold sway. This is the American dialogue. It's the battle between left and right. And the battle is a battle of words, ideas, conversation, give and take. The founders established the whole country with that idea that we have to talk our way through this. We need each other. The progressives need the conservatives need the progressives. We need each other. Otherwise, we're just thinking the same thing. And the conservatives have something to say. The liberals have something to say. And we have to create situations where we can hear each other instead of continuing to silo ourselves through our phones that are designed by corporations who benefit by us staying in our phones, continuing to communicate with people who agree with us, and letting us yell at people who disagree with us in an anonymous fashion that dehumanizes them and hurts us. Peter Singer, the guy who wrote Animal Liberation, says that the problems of animal agriculture, it seems like a hard segue. It's not. The problems of animal agriculture are, yes, bad for the animals. But a real big problem with animal agriculture is that a human being has to be able to be in a situation where they're willing to slaughter lots and lots of sentient beings. And the thing that does to your psyche, it changes you, turns you into something different, turns you into something that you weren't before. And the outrage that we've been allowed to do on the internet through not being able to see someone's face when we say something mean, or to disagree and attack ad hominem at other people, that does something to us too. So we're siloing ourselves so we can hear what we like, and we're arguing, hurting the person on the other side and hurting ourselves. There it is, guys. Let me know what you think. Everything is at Aaron Wayne Yoga. If I keep being political on this podcast, I'm going to have to change the yoga out of this. This is not a yoga podcast. See you on the next one, guys. Peace.